بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وبعد, to continue inshallah with the tahdhib of Ihya Ulum al-Din by Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an. And in the last lesson, so previously, we stopped at the fada'il of the adhan and the fada'il or the fadila of the maktuba, so the virtue of the adhan, the virtue of the fard salah, so the maktuba salah. And I believe we stopped at the fadilatul sujood. So just to quickly recap, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. So the salah is upon the believer prescribed at a due time, and it has to be prayed in its due time, and it has to be prayed likewise with its due arkan, its pillars, and so on and so forth. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in a hadith, I'm not going to go through the actual Arabic text now, just to be brief and quick, that the one who prays the maktubat, the 5 prayers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them a means of expiation for his or her sin. And the Prophet ﷺ compared the 5 salawat to someone who has a river outside of the house, and they wash in that river every time they leave the house, or a stream, etc. The body will be extremely clean, immaculate by the end of the day. Likewise, the one who prays 5 times a day, they will be clean and cleared of their sin. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says that the salah is the foundation, imaduddin, it's the foundation. Without the foundation, no house can be built. And so the salah is very, very important. Then he speaks about the adhan, or prior to that, the adhan, and the virtue of the mu'adhin, the virtue of calling the adhan. Alhamdulillah, here we have many young brothers that give the adhan, and the fuqaha, they discuss, or the ulama, the virtue of the adhan. Is it better than the virtue of the imama? So is it better for a person to lead salah or to give the adhan? Which of the two has more reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why? Because traditionally anyway, now we have microphones, etc. We have pre-programmed apps that tell us what time it is to pray. But previously, you would know that it's time to pray because you hear the adhan of the mu'adhin. And so the mu'adhin will be taking the reward from everyone that comes to the salah. Not taking their reward, but sharing in their reward. Everyone that comes to salah will be coming to salah because of the mu'adhin. And so the mu'adhin on Yawm al-Qiyamah will share in the reward for everyone's prayer, etc. And likewise, it's from the sha'air of Islam. It's from the pillars of Islam. It's from the signs of Islam. If a person enters a land and hears the adhan, they know that they're in a Muslim land. And so there's great virtue attached to the adhan. And it's a good practice to try to be in the masjid for the adhan. And when the adhan goes off, to listen to the adhan, stop what you're doing, what you're saying, etc. And it's very easy to fall into not doing that, to become busied by the dunya and so on and so forth. And then he speaks about the virtue of jama'ah, and the jama'ah, how important it is. And we mentioned the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the salah of the person who prays in jama'ah is 27 times better than the salah of the person who prays by himself. And so even if I'm not praying in the masjid, let's say for example, I'm not praying in the masjid, I'm staying at home and praying with my family because there's no local masjid, I should gather my family together and make it a practice that we pray the salah together. And this is something which doesn't happen in many households. In many households, the salah is prayed individually. Everyone's praying in their own time, in their own room, etc. It should be a family practice where the eldest leads the salah, whether it's the father or the eldest son, whatever the case, an uncle, whoever's there that can lead the salah, should lead the salah, and everyone should pray behind them. We should make that a practice in our homes. And this itself will bring unity to the household, will bring barakah to the household. We shouldn't make our households like the airport musallat, where everyone's praying one after the other and so on and so forth. If there's no space, make space. Move things out of the way. And if we want to attach our children to the salah, then attaching them to the jama'ah in a family, it's a good way to do it. And we're going to be questioned on Yawm al-Qiyamah about, especially again for the men, about our families, the salah of our families. We're going to be held responsible. That's one of the roles of the man. The man is questioned for the Islam of his household. It's not to say that the woman has no autonomy over her own Islam. Of course she does. And many times over, it's the woman who's pushing and driving the Islam in the household. But the man will be questioned. The man will be questioned. And so we have to take that responsibility seriously. Then we spoke about the fadila of the jama'ah, and I believe we stopped there. So now we're on to fadilat al-sujud. So the virtue of the sajda, al-sujud. The al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he says, روي أن رجلا قال لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أدعو الله أن يجعلني من أهل شفاعتك وأن يرزقني مرافقتك في الجنة فقال أعني بكثرة السجود. So someone came to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام and he said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua for me, supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I am from those who receive your shafa'ah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses me with your companionship in paradise. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, provide me aid in that over yourself by increasing in your sujood, in the amount of sujood that you engage in. And so in order for a person to engage in sujood, they have to pray. The sujood, there is sujood shukr, there is sujood tilawa, and so on and so forth. But the main sujood, the sujood which is ibadah, is what? The salah. And some of the fuqaha, they even go so far as to say that if a person cannot physically perform sujood, they don't have to stand up for the salah. Why? Because the standing in salah has been prescribed for the sake of the sujood. Because it's a complete sujood is when you go from standing to prostrating. And so the prostration of the salah is you could say one of the most important parts of the salah. And we'll come to see inshallah. Then he says, وَقَالَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ سِيمَاهُمْ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ مِنْ أَثَرِ السُّجُودِ, talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking about the Sahaba and those who follow in their way, in the ayah Muhammad Rasulullah, and from the description that in their faces is the sign of their sujood, that you can see upon their faces the marks, the distinction of prayer. And alhamdulillah, you see that with many Muslims, where they have a mark on their forehead due to the sujood, etc. And some of the ulama, they say that's the sujood mark that is being referred to here. Others, they say it's the light that emanates from one's face due to their sujood, etc. Light that emanates from one's face due to their worship, and so on and so forth. And with some people, you can see that. Some people that spend their days and their nights in worship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places nur upon their faces. And the ulama, they say it emanates from within. It's a light that's within them due to their ibadah, and it comes through the face. Then he says, فَقِيلَ مَا I just explained that. He says, فَقِيلَ هُوَ مَا يَلْتَصِقُ بِوُجُوهِ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ عِنْدَ السُّجُودِ وَقِيلَ هُوَ نُورُ الْخُشُوعِ فَإِنَّهُ يُشْرِقُ مِنَ الْبَاطِنِ عَلَى الظَّاهِرِ. Exactly as I just mentioned. So Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أقرب ما يكون العبد من ربه وهو ساجد فأكثروا الدعاء. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, according to the hadith narrated by al-Ghazali from Abu Hurairah, that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, a slave will be closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he is in sujood. That's the closest that a person will be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, فَأَكْثِرُوا الدُّعَاء. So when you're in that state, increase your dua. Make sure you make a lot of dua. If you want to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best place to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in sujood. That's the best place. If you want to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do it in sujood. All of those things, the best time to do it is in sujood. And you, Allahu alam, if any of you have seen, but I've seen individuals. I read of individuals, they would place their heads on the ground for the first sujood of their sunnah after Maghrib, and they would raise their head at the adhan of Isha. I've read about this, and then I saw it myself. I saw it with my own eyes. Individuals who will be in sujood for more than an hour, just in sujood, making dua, istighfar, dhikr, etc. So this happens today. And if you go to Medina, you go to Mecca, and you go close to the Kaaba, or you go to the front row in Medina, you'll see it with your own eyes. Individuals that have their heads on the ground in sujood for an hour, 2 hours, etc. And of course, I'm not saying that everyone should do that all the time, etc. But there are those Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places love in their heart of sujood. That's what they do. They can't help it. They want to be in sujood. They want to be in a state of sajda, prostrating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a blessing for a person who has that desire. It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, fadilatul khushu'. So the virtue of khushu'. And khushu' is often translated as concentration in salah, being conscious in the prayer, perhaps reflective in the prayer. قال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام من صلى ركعتين لم يحدث نفسه فيهما بشيء من الدنيا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. He said عليه الصلاة والسلام, the one who prays 2 units of prayer and he does not speak to himself within those 2 units about anything related to the dunya, that salah will be a form of expiation for his previous sins. So the one who prays 2 units of prayer and he does not talk to himself in the units of prayer about anything related to the dunya, i.e. he's focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's trying to reflect over the ayat that he's reciting, etc. That salah will be a means of expiation for his or her sins, I should say. Then he mentions, وَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ لِلَّذِي أَوْصَاهُ وَإِذَا صَلَّيْتَ فَصَلِّ صَلَاةَ مُوَدِّعٍ أي مُوَدِّعٍ لنفسه مُوَدِّعٍ لهواه ومُوَدِّعٍ لعمره سائر إلى مولاه. So another hadith, and al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he explains it. Someone sought advice from the Prophet ﷺ, and he advised him, and then he said to him, and if you pray the salah of the person who is basically bidding farewell. Salatul muwaddi'. So the muwaddi' is the one who's saying farewell. Before you travel, you bid farewell to your family, etc. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when you pray as if you are bidding farewell. And al-Ghazali, he comments, meaning he's bidding farewell to himself, he's bidding farewell to his desires, and he's bidding farewell to his life, basically, as he's now traveling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's now going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many athar. He doesn't mention many here in the Tahdhib, but if you go to the original Ihya, there are many athar mentioned. And you can find books about khashya and khushu' and so on and so forth. Then he says, وَالصَّلَاةُ مُنَاجَاتٌ فَكَيْفَ تَكُونُ مَعَ الْغَفْلَةِ. That salah, what the actual word, where does it come from? Sila. And salah previously used to be dua. Linguistically, it means supplication. And he says, as-salatu munajah. Munajah. And munajah is basically calling. When you are praying, you're calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though you may not be calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your tongue, you're calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your actions. When you pray, you're saying, Allah, look at me. That's what we're doing when we stand in prayer. If we're praying with ikhlas, we're saying, oh Allah, look at me. Oh Allah, accept from me. You're trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're calling out to him. So al-Ghazali, he says, how can it be that a person is calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they're in a state of ghafla? They're in a state of heedlessness. I'm calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I'm in a state of heedlessness. For those who have children, if you're speaking to your child and your child is aloof and heedless and not taking any notice of what you're saying, you will feel agitated, irritated by that. And you might say to them, concentrate, I'm talking to you. Where's your respect? Where are your manners? That's how we are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if our heads are everywhere other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in salah, we should remind ourselves, I'm standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to call upon Him. I'm calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if I'm calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I should make sure that I'm in the right frame of mind, mind up here and heart. And that's why it's recommended to come to the salah early, to be in the masjid for the adhan. Why? It gives yourself time to allow the dunya to slowly switch off in the mind. But one of the biggest problems that we have, all of us, unfortunately, illa man rahimahullah, except for those Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon, is that we carry the dunya everywhere with us now. And it's not one type of dunya that we carry. Every type of dunya we carry. We carry the entire dunya from where we are to the other side of the world with us at all times in our pockets. And so we're constantly attached to the dunya. Messages, news, updates, whatever it might be. And so it's important that when we're in the masjid, we are not using our phones the way that we would use our phones at home. It's important that if I come to the masjid, I try not to be distracted by my phone and by dunya. I try not to be distracted. The Prophet ﷺ, in fact, he said that if a person asks for an item that he's lost in the masjid, you should make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't return it back to him. Why? Because the masjid is not a place to look for lost property. The masjid is a place for salah, a place for dhikr, a place for ibadah, a place for qira'ah, a place for ta'allum. So this place, it's sacred. And if we treat the masjid the way it should be treated, that will lead to khushu' developing. It will lead to khushu' developing. Then he says, وَيُرْوَى عَنْ عَلِي ibn al-Husayn, so the grandson of Ali ibn Abi Talib رضي الله تعالى عنه, أنه كان إذا توضأ اصفر لونه فيقول له أهله ما هذا الذي يعتريك عند الوضوء فيقول أتدرون بين يدي من أريد أن أقوم. So it's narrated that the grandson of Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he would perform his wudu, his color would change, the color of his face. He would literally change color. And they would ask him, why does this happen to you when you're performing wudu? What's going on? And he would reply to them, do you know who I'm going to stand in front of right now? So he would be afraid. And if we want to imagine, how is this possible? Imagine a person who's going to court and they're going to stand in front of a judge and they're looking at a lengthy sentence. They're going to be nervous. They might turn pale. They might feel certain symptoms, physical symptoms. So likewise, when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're standing in front of the one who has dominion over all things, the judge of all judges. That's the reality. But we're in a state of heedlessness, unfortunately, and so we don't understand these things. We can't relate to these things. Then he says, وقال ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما ركعتان مقتصدتان في تفكر خير من قيام الليل أو قيام ليلة والقلب ساهٌ. So he said, Ibn Abbas, to pray 2 units of prayer with reflection within those 2 units. So 2 units of prayer and the heart is present is better than an entire night of prayer and the heart is not present. So for a person to simply pray, focus on 2 units of prayer with reflection, i.e. trying to concentrate, trying to develop khushu'. It's better for that person than trying to pray the entire night and there's no heart present. And this gives us indication of where we should start. If I want to be a person of ibadah, start with 2 rak'ah, but 2 rak'ah with contemplation, reflection. What does that mean though? It doesn't mean that I develop intrusive thoughts, waswas, where I'm starting to say, oh, no, I didn't recite this properly. I wasn't concentrating and so on and so forth. And I start again. No. It means if I remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 2% at first, next time aim for 3%. If I hit 3%, next time aim for 4%, etc. Until I'm reflecting and I'm attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the majority of my salah. So 2 units of prayer in such a manner is better than the entire night. But unfortunately, shaitan will come when a person starts practicing, when a person wants to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, pray the night. And wake up in the dead of the night and make it difficult. And so this person tries and they can't do it for very long. But rather, a person should start with that which is small and increase gradually. Then he says, فضيلة المسجد وموضع الصلاة. He says, قال الله عز وجل إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions those that come to his houses are those who have belief in him and the last day. The houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are occupied by the believers. The believers' hearts are attached to these places. And any masjid is a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do not have a monopoly over the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, we have committees and imams and so on and so forth. And to some extent, they have some autonomy over the way it's run, etc. But that's for regulation. It doesn't mean that the masajid belong to them. That's for regulatory purposes. It's necessary, just like running a country. But these houses belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we're in these houses, we should remember that we are in the house of Allah. If we are conscious of the fact that we are in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way we treat the house will reflect that. And on this point, for example, some individuals, when they use the bathroom in some masajid, it's as if they're in a farmhouse, not in a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unfortunately. And that's wrong. Some people, they leave rubbish laying around. Some people, they leave excess parts of their body laying around, and like nails, skin, stuff. That's not acceptable behavior. It's a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Playing games in the masjid, things like that. We should avoid these things. And when I say playing games, I mean computer games on phones, being loud. Being loud if it's dhikr, Quran, yeah, maybe. But being loud where it's obstructive and we're preventing people from praying, assuming that we have monopoly, we have authority over a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we've been praying here longer, that we have the right to determine who can come and who can't come, etc. All of these things. The houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belong to Allah and Allah alone. And just because we build a house for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't mean we own it. It belongs to Allah. Then he says, وَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ مَنْ بَنَى مَسْجِدًا من بنى لله مسجدا بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة أو بنى الله له قصرا في الجنة. Whoever builds a house for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will build a house for him in Jannah, or a castle for him in Jannah. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا دخل أحدكم المسجد فليركع ركعتين قبل أن يجلس. If any of you enter into the masjid, then let him pray 2 units of prayer prior to sitting down. Why? It's signification that this is not like a normal place, out of respect. Tahiyyatul Masjid, it's showing respect to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by showing respect to his house. And Tahiyyatul Masjid, it's only if there is no salah at the time. So if I enter into the masjid and they're praying zuhr, the zuhr salah takes the place of the tahiyyah. I don't need to pray 2 rak'ah after I prayed zuhr. Likewise, if I have a sunnah prayer that I'm going to pray when I come to the masjid, that sunnah prayer becomes the tahiyyah. And of course, there's a difference of opinion. Should a person pray after Asr, Tahiyyatul Masjid? So the Ahnaf and the Hanabila, they say no. The Shafi'iyya, they say yes. And the difference of opinion goes back to a principle in usul, which we're not going to go into now. So if a person follows the Shafi'i school, they can pray. If a person follows the Hanafi or Hanbali school, don't pray. There's no contention there. It's all related to the practice of the Sahaba, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Then he says, al-Ghazali, he says, وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام الملائكة تصلي على أحدكم ما دام في مصلاه الذي يصلي فيه. تقول اللهم صل عليه اللهم ارحمه اللهم اغفر له ما لم يحدث أو يخرج من المسجد. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said that the angels will send salutations and blessings upon a person so long as that person is in his musalla. The musalla being the particular place of prayer wherein he prayed. And the ulama, they'll discuss, is it the actual space that a person prayed in, or does it, can they move around in the masjid, etc. The angels will send dua or make dua, supplicate, send their salutations, their salam upon this person. Taqul, Allahumma salli alayhi, O Allah, send your salah upon him. Allahumma arhamhu, O Allah, have mercy upon him. Allahumma aghfir lahu, O Allah, have forgiveness for this person. ما لم يحدث أو يخرج من المسجد. So long as this person doesn't basically nullify their wudu or leave the masjid. And so a person being in the masjid itself is ibadah. After the salah, waiting after the salah and occupying myself with Quran, dhikr, things like that, it's ibadah. And the angels are supplicating for me when I'm in that state. And if you think about what the angels ask for, Salatullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His salah upon a person, guides them. It's guidance. And rahmah, nothing in this life comes except through the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything we have is by Allah's rahmah. Everything we don't have is by Allah's rahmah. And so the rahmah being requested on our behalf by angels is a great blessing, something we don't want to miss out on. It's an opportunity. And maghfirah, we all sin every single day. And so having angels asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, and it used to be a practice, a common practice, that a person would stay in the masjid between Maghrib and Isha, which we spoke about, I believe, previously. A person would spend between Maghrib and Isha in the masjid. Here, it's difficult. Why? Because Maghrib is so early in comparison to Isha. And even in the summer, there's quite a distance, I believe, between Maghrib and Isha. But I think it gets closer. And so it's a good practice to have, to come to the masjid and sit between Maghrib and Isha. And when sitting, use that time for Quran, use that time for learning, use that time for dhikr. That time should be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for spiritual benefit. And if a person does this every day, it will make a massive difference in their life. A massive difference. Then he says, وقال علي كرم الله وجهه إذا مات العبد يبكي عليه مصلاه من الأرض ومصعد عمله من السماء ثم قرأ فما بكت عليهم السماء والأرض وما كانوا منظرين. So the al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he mentions Ali radiallahu anhu, and Imam al-Ghazali here, he says كرم الله وجهه. The ulama, they don't really have an issue with that. Some contemporary ulama, perhaps they'll have an issue with saying كرم الله وجهه for Ali radiallahu anhu specifically. Why? Because they say you're specifying him with a particular dua, and there's tashabbuh there and so on and so forth. But the classical ulama didn't really have a problem with it. And so we shouldn't make a problem out of something that the classical ulama had no problem with. He says if a person passes away, his musalla, the place where he used to frequently pray, will cry for him. Likewise, mas'ad amalihi, the place from which his actions used to be taken up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will also cry for him. And then he read the ayah, فَمَا بَكَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ وَمَا كَانُوا مُنظَرِينَ, in reference to the people of Fir'aun. When Fir'aun punished them and they were taken, the heavens and the earth did not cry for them. They were not missed. They were not missed. But the mu'min, when he passes away, when she passes away, the heavens and the earth will cry for that person. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a great blessing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the salah has given us a rahmah. And by coming to His house, a rahmah. If you think about this masjid, how many times it's been mentioned, the social benefits from the masjid where we get to know each other. We wouldn't have known each other otherwise. Many of us from very different walks of life, different parts of the world, etc. We wouldn't have known each other otherwise. Likewise, with our social lives, we live in a time now where people are suffering from loneliness, isolation, depression, and things like that. When you come to the masjid, you can find that social fulfillment because you're seeing people, you're talking to people, you make friends with people, etc. And we should increase in doing that. The masjid is our hub. The masjid should be the center of our lives. When a person moves house, the first question they should ask, is there a masjid nearby? That should be the first point on their mind. Is there a masjid nearby? Why? If I move to a place with no masjid, I'm going to lose a part of my iman, a very important part of my life. So the fact that we have an active masjid, it's a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we conclude with that, inshallah. It's quite short today, my apologies. But that's the end of that chapter, particular bab anyway. And the next bab, al-bab al-thani, kayfiyatul a'mal al-zahira, which will be next week, inshallah.